Good morning, guys. Today we are going to speak about the very last part of cloning, which is the extension part. So basically that will be for all the students that are aiming for merit and excellence, just for you to have a better understanding of how something like inbreeding would be very bad. It would be a big biological issue in terms of having less variation. So let's get into that. So you can just follow again on the class notes that I have uploaded to the Google Classroom. Okay, so basically this will be the question that you can see there. So the extension part, why is inbreeding such a biological issue? So if we have a look at these different aspects that I've mentioned here, the first thing that we're going to discuss is the gene pool. So basically what that means is that it's the amount of alleles that will be available within a community. And we want the number of alleles to be more. So we want it to be as many as possible. So when there are a lot of different alleles and there's great variation, we say that there's a big gene pool. So therefore, it's actually a very good thing if someone is, for instance, not living in a very tiny community, and that you have different people coming into that community all the time. So that is a big thing, or a good thing actually, because in a biological sense, it makes that gene pool much bigger because we now have more alleles that are present within that gene pool. So when sexual reproduction takes place, we can have greater variation. So there's more of these alleles to choose from that will be given to the offspring. And so therefore you will have greater variation within the offspring as well. So that is why it is actually a great thing to have a big gene pool. So say, for instance, something happened like an earthquake, for instance, or a tsunami or something like that. And a lot of the population got wiped out in the process. I'm aware that's such a cruel way of saying it. But say, for instance, that was the scenario. Then that would mean that our gene pool would decrease greatly. So once again, that's not a great thing. And we will have a look at why in a moment. Okay, so the next point that we have there is, as I said, there will be less variation. So remember when we spoke about variation being a good thing within biology because it provides a stronger offspring. The reason for that is, say for instance, we take this example of COVID-19. If there is not great variation within the human population, it means that certain individuals, or that all the individuals will be exactly the same. So say, for instance, we take the example of cloning the best athletes in Kapiti College, and then having this amazing athletics team, and we're winning all the meets and everything. That is fantastic. But remember, there's less variation. So say, for instance, that athlete cannot survive something like COVID-19, then it means that the whole athletics team will no longer exist, and it might lead to the human population becoming extinct. And so therefore farmers will have a big problem with this as well. So if they have less variation within their crops, so meaning they're only planting one type of corn, for instance, and there's a specific disease that pops up within that crop, then it means that the whole crop will be wiped out. But if a farmer had different types of corn, for instance, and one of those types were resistant to the disease, then it means that that crop will at least survive and they can continue to sell corn. The next aspect that we're going to have a look at is homozygous mutation. So remember we spoke about this word homozygous. So meaning that if you have your pair of alleles, so if we have the gene, for instance, remember one allele comes from your mom, one allele comes from your dad. So we have a paternal allele and a maternal allele as the example that you see here below. So we will speak about this example in greater detail in a moment. But basically homozygous means, remember the word homo means the same. So we're speaking here about the same alleles. Okay. So we have some hidden mutations within our DNA. And the good thing is that most of these hidden mutations are hidden because they are recessive. And so because it's a recessive gene, obviously it's not expressed within the phenotype. So you never get to even see it. So you might have all these mutations. Yes, you are actually maybe part of the X-Men and you didn't even know it, but you will have a lot of these mutations, and because it's hidden, you might not know about it. But the moment when that hidden allele, so the recessive allele, links up with another recessive allele, obviously then it will be expressed within the phenotype. So say, for instance, you marry someone and they also have that recessive allele present, and the two of you have a child together, then the chances are much bigger of those two recessive alleles being expressed within the phenotype of your offspring. Okay. So basically when there is inbreeding, because we have a smaller gene pool available, so less variation, it means that there will be a much bigger chance of those recessive alleles being expressed within the offspring. So the next point that we're going to have a look at is weaker offspring. So there is less chance of survival for the offspring. So remember what I said, because there's less variation, it means that the offspring is a bit weaker, because if something happens, then obviously it might lead to the whole population becoming extinct. But in this scenario, we're also speaking here about the homozygous mutations. So we're going to look at this example of sickle cell disease. So sickle cell disease affects your red blood cells. So it looks like this. So your red blood cells have this biconcave shape. So bi meaning two, and then concave meaning it goes inwards. So when you look at it from the side, you will have both sides like tilting inwards a bit. And that is the normal shape of a red blood cell. And it's great that it has this nice big round shape, because now you have lots of surface area for oxygen to attach to those red blood cells and to be transported from the heart to all the different parts of the body that will need the oxygen in the process of cellular respiration. But with sickle cell disease, what will happen is that their red blood cells will have this sickle shape to it. Okay, so a sickle, you might not know what it is, maybe if you live on a farm, but a sickle is basically, it's almost like well, we call it a panga in South Africa, but it's almost like this big blade that you have, and it has that sickle shape to it, and you can go through like a forest or something and then cut through like all the different plants with it. So that's where that name comes from, the sickle shape. And so basically their red blood cells will have this sickle shape to it. So meaning that there's less oxygen that can attach to it. And the other disadvantage of this is because it has all these different sharp ends to it, it can basically hook together and then form a blood clot. So the chances of someone with sickle cell disease getting blood clots is quite high. So if we look at the genetics of someone that has sickle cell disease, because that's an example of a homozygous mutation, it looks like this. So say, for instance, capital A, that will be our dominant allele. So that is a normal red blood cell. So it will have that nice biconcave shape to it. And then small letter a, or lowercase a, will be the recessive allele, and that will be the allele for sickle cell disease. Okay. So say, for instance, you have parents that are heterozygous, so meaning they have one allele that is dominant and one allele that is recessive, and both parents will be like that. Then these are the chances of the offspring. So if we do a simple monohybrid cross, you can see that these are the chances of the offspring having sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disease. So basically you can see there, that child will be normal, will have normal red blood cells. That child will have normal red blood cells, but will be a carrier because he or she will be carrying that recessive allele. The same with this one. And then there is a 25% chance of the child having sickle cell anemia when it gets both of those recessive alleles from the parent. So say, for instance, there's inbreeding with someone that has sickle cell disease with another person with sickle cell disease, because now remember, because you have a smaller gene pool, it means that there might be more of these recessive alleles available within that population. So the chances of a person that has sickle cell disease mating with another person with sickle cell disease and then carrying that over to the offspring is now much greater. So you can just now imagine if these are the two alleles that you have available, the recessive alleles that you have available, obviously if it's within a big population, you might have many carriers of it, but they won't even be aware of the fact that they are a carrier. So obviously it's only if you have sickle cell anemia that you will know that you will have two recessive alleles present for that disease. So if a person like this mates with another person, you can see that there's 100% chance of the offspring having sickle cell anemia. And therefore it becomes this massive disease within a population. So you might have certain populations with a great prevalence of sickle cell anemia within that population. I'm not saying, like, please take note, and I'm not saying that everyone with sickle cell anemia, that there has been inbreeding involved with that. Not at all. I'm just using that as an example of a homozygous mutation so that you are aware of how it works. So, I mean, it might definitely just be by chance that it happened like that. But I'm just saying that if it's a very small community, then the chances of these recessive alleles popping up within the phenotype just becomes much greater. And that is the big reason why inbreeding is such a big problem and that it's frowned upon. So it's not only a social fact that it's frowned upon or anything like that. It's also actually a biological risk to that specific population. So hopefully that was helpful, and hopefully that allowed you to understand a bit more about cloning and specifically this question of why inbreeding is a biological issue.